Alright guys, so Ben here with FNP Wargamers. I'm going to do a quick video. I got a new toy. I'm going to put it together. I'm going to talk about some of the tactics that I'm going to use hopefully when I field it for the first time. And that toy is going to be a brand new Ironclad Dreadnought. So we're going to go over some of the steps I'm going to take to actually put it together. I'm going to talk about some of my hobbying techniques, and we're also going to talk about a little bit of tactics just while I slam pieces together. So, without further ado, let's start clipping some stuff. Now, I probably will chop this up a little bit just to take some of the extra bits out, and you know, just to speed up some of the parts where I'll be cleaning up mold lines, and you know, checking the instructions. I may be a man, but I don't like to screw stuff up, so I will always use my instructions. Always follow the instructions. Because otherwise, I'll mess it up. I don't need that. I didn't pay as much for these as I do just to mess them up, so I'm not too proud to follow instructions. But anyway, so let's talk about. Well, you know what? Let me clip out this main body section. We'll get back to it once I've cleaned it up a little bit. Alright, so now I'm going to start cleaning this up, and again I will speed this up just because nobody wants to watch me scrape mold lines for probably 30 to 40 minutes because I get a little intense, but I do want to talk about how I feel about mold lines. I notice them really easily, and they bother me. They bother me bad. I know a lot of guys spend a lot of time on their paint. You know, I get a lot of hassle. You know, oh, your army's not painted yet. Your army's not painted yet. And yes, paint is absolutely really important. It's vital to making your guys look good. But my personal belief, if you've got mold lines on there, I don't care how long you spent painting it, you're not going to be able to cover that up with any amount of paint, shade, you know, edge highlighting. There's just nothing, no technique that's going to help fix that. So I always take the time, I clean up some of these extra bits, and I probably spend way too much time doing this, but in the end, if I'm going to spend all the time I'm going to spend painting these guys, and I'm going to be fielding them for, you know, hopefully years to come, I want them to look right. I don't want to ever miss something and then be unsatisfied with it once I've finished painting it, and then be disappointed in it. I want to do my very best with it the whole way through, and for that reason I will always scrape off my mold lines. Hopefully someday I'll get to the point where I'm not so obsessive compulsive with it, but this is always going to be a part of my process. Okay, so now I spent a little time scraping all these guys down, as you saw. Not the most entertaining process, but for me, absolutely worth it. Now, every now and then you get a little bit of that excess plastic that you had on there. I just scrape it off with an old toothbrush. Same kind I would use to strip something and clean it up. Now, a lot of this wasn't too bad, actually. I was pretty happy about it. And in some tough cases, you just use your fingernail. Come right off. Now, I've had a couple people tell me, you know, just wait until the model's done and then scrape off whatever you can see, because, you know, half of it you might not need to scrape off anyway. But I've also run into the problem where I've tried that, and then there were bits that I couldn't get to, and there was just no way for me to get a knife back in there or anything in there that I was going to be able to scrape those bits off with, and so I ended up being really disappointed in the way it turned out. And so now I just kind of clean them up as I'm putting it together. It definitely takes a lot longer. And that alone is probably not going to be acceptable for a lot of people, but that is the price I pay to make my models the way I want to make them. So, you know. Alright, so glue time. So I typically use Superglue just for the fact that if I make a mistake or I'm not happy with the way something turned out, I can break it off and fix it. I have had a couple guys come apart if they took a nasty fall or something like that, but nothing that I wasn't able to fix with a little more Superglue. So let's see if I gobbed on too much of there. My nozzle actually broke off because it was glued to itself. So, as I was saying earlier, there is a reason I'm building an Ironclad over, say, a Venerable or just a regular Dreadnought, because this is going to be for my White Scars. So, my theory is, White Scars being able to charge in and out of combat, I'll be able to make a little bit more use of combat-oriented Dreadnought versus a shooty Dreadnought. I did finally get to play with the shooty Dreadnought the other day, and I actually really liked it, but when I was learning how to play the game, I was using Jonathan's F&P chapter, and there was an Ironclad Dreadnought in there that did a lot of work for me, and I really enjoyed working with it, and I really enjoyed fielding it each time, because once it got into combat, it was just devastating. And so I'm always happy to get it into combat. Now therein lies the problem of an Ironclad Dreadnought. They are not exactly sprinters. They don't have many options in order to get them across the board, and so they're not super great at getting themselves into combat, so you have to be kind of crafty. So you basically can walk him across the board, like, 6 inches at a time, which is pretty quick considering that he's a giant, steel sarcophagus. 6 inches per turn is pretty good, but if you want to get him into combat quickly, it's going to take a little while. If you're playing Raven Guard, you've obviously got the option to just set them off to the side and basically deep strike them right off the bat. But that doesn't work for me because I'm White Scars. I had to figure out what I was going to do in order to get my Dreadnought into combat as quickly as possible. Everything else is speedy, everything else is trying to get into combat as fast as possible. So what am I going to do? My options were get a Dreadnought drop pod from Forge World, which they don't make anymore. So my options were buy a regular drop pod and convert it. The cost there is about 100 and something points. I want to say close to 150 points. It's been a while since I looked at it. But that on top of the cost of my Dreadnought, not exactly what I want to do in order to get him fielded. My other option was to get a Storm Raven and throw him in the Storm Raven and then send him into combat that way by dropping him out of the airplane. Now I do like that idea a lot because I also like having the option to put other troops in the Storm Raven. I like the option to have all the firepower that Storm Raven comes with. I like having a T7 flyer, with 14 wounds tooling around on the battlefield, just laying down hate and, hard to hit. And I've been wanting one for a while. So I actually have one of those picked up, and hopefully before too long he'll be joining the rest of the army. However, Storm Raven is about 350 points when you start kitting it out, when you start putting decent weapons on it. So it's not exactly a cheap Dreadnought delivery system. There really isn't a good option that I've found yet in order to put a Dreadnought on the battlefield and move him across as quickly as I can without being Raven Guard. And as that's not exactly an option for me, I've just kind of accepted my fate. I bought a Storm Raven, and I'm just going to use it to drop off as much stuff in my opponent's face as possible. So the instructions for this thing are pretty vague. They basically just show a bunch of pieces going together. It doesn't show really an order. It just says, here, glue them. So I'm trying to figure out what the best way to do this is and make sure that my pieces are all actually touching in the correct way and leaving me with the right ratio so that they're not going to not fit later. So it looks like we're going to wing it. I'm going to put some stuff on here, hopefully stick it to the right places, and we'll be good to go. Now in most cases, when I'm in doubt, I will just use a little bit of poster tack and I will do a test fit. And I think that test fitting is huge, especially if you're trying to do something a little bit custom or something that's maybe not standard. because with that test fit, you know, you don't want to, if you're putting extra bits on, or if you're trying to make something wonky happen, you definitely want to make sure that everything's going to fit together just right. So taking that extra time absolutely makes your life a little bit easier. Get this back piece on there, and we'll have somewhat of a chassis. This is my first Dreadnought, so I'm just not used to it. Still a cool model, still looks really good. Odd that it doesn't have maybe a little bit more direction in the instructions. And I guess I have been putting together Primaris models that are pretty step by step, so maybe I'm just spoiled with the new stuff, and this is how everybody's been doing it for ages. Okay. How does this work? Oh, you know what? I screwed this all up, because that has got little slots in the base for these arms. Perfect little slots to slide them in. Alright, so as I had mentioned about my Superglue, gonna put my money where my mouth is and have to take it apart. Little snap. Okay. Ta-da. You know what? I bet you weren't supposed to put that back on either. Instructions don't make this easy. How does this... Is it obvious that I'm new? Aha. Snaps again. Okay, man. You know, just a little user error. And after a little bit of frustration, yay, we've got a Dreadnought chassis. Now I'll cut out and shave up the legs. Alright, so we've got those cleaned up after a little bit of scrubbing and scraping. Now we're good to go on these. Thankfully the legs are a little bit more self-explanatory than the body was. Throw on glue, jam them together, good to go. So my main strategy once I do get this guy onto the field is going to have a lot to do with trying to take out the biggest threat on the board. Since the Ironclad is so dangerous in combat with his seismic hammer, doing, you know, potential 5 damage, strength 12, 5 damage a hit, -4 AP? Can't recall off the top of my head. But it's a serious weapon. I want to say he's got 4 attacks. That's a serious threat. That can take out some armor really quickly. All you have to do is hit something to fill a couple of their saves, and, you know, hey, there's 10, 15, 20 damage. That'll drain something really quick, and I've had the experience of that when I took out a Dreadnought in one round of fighting. Guy I was fighting against, you know, I hit 3 times. He failed all 3 of his saves, and it was just a solid 5 damage apiece. And that takes out a Dreadnought real quick. I was just as surprised as he was, but I was rather excited about it. So that coupled with the other combat weapon, see the issue with the chain fist is that, or not the chain fist, the seismic hammer is that it's going to hit on a 4 as opposed to a 3. But if you got a chain fist on there, or a chain fist instead, it's going to hit on the normal 3 with the -4 and it's just do a solid 4 damage at strength 12. It's a good swap, but if you've got a Dreadnought combat weapon on him, it's going to be almost the same profile, but for a solid 3 damage, you're also not taking a penalty to hit. So your other option is a Hurricane Bolter. If you really want to add shooting onto your Ironclad Dreadnought, then by all means, but for me he's going to be a combat oriented Dreadnought, so I just want to slam him into combat as quick as I can and have him hit stuff as hard as he can, which is something that he's actually rather good at. So I won't be giving him a Hurricane Bolter unless it is very just points dependent, and if I do give him a Hurricane Bolter, he's also going to lose out on the option to reroll his ones in close combat when he's rolling to hit. That is another big benefit of the Ironclad, and it's another great reason to give him combat weapons instead of that Hurricane Bolter. Hurricane Bolter's nice for the fact that he's got a little range on him now, but I really think it's a disservice to the Dreadnought that's built for combat. If you want a Hurricane Bolter, find a way to fit it somewhere else. I just don't think it's a good fit for the Dreadnought. The penalty for losing his reroll ones in combat, especially with, you know, if you're trying to hit something with that seismic hammer and you're hitting on a 4, just it doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit well with the Dreadnought. So every chance I get, he's going with 2 combat weapons and probably a pair of heavy flamers, since he can add a heavy flamer to his seismic hammer, and he can add a heavy flamer to his combat weapon. So a pair of heavy flamers, get him in close, light something up with flamers, and then start punching stuff with that seismic hammer. Now the thing is, if I really need to hit something, but I don't need to do 5 damage a hit, that's when I'll switch to that combat weapon, and I won't have to worry about hitting on a 4 and re-rolling a 1, hopefully. It still has a lot of margin for error. So instead, if I don't need to do a flat 5 damage, if it's just vital for me to hit and do some sort of damage, I'll just rely on that combat weapon instead. Alright, so he's coming together. Little guy's looking alright. I haven't really decided on the faceplate yet. I'm probably just going to go with the one here. Alright, so made a decision. I'm going to go with this guy. So we were talking about some of the tactics I plan to use to get that bad boy out there. And like I was saying, you know, I really just want to get it into combat with the biggest threat on the board. Now he's T8, so he can definitely walk through a group of Space Marines taking bolter fire. They're only going to be wounding them on 6s. You know, that's kind of nice. But he's only got 4 attacks, I want to say. So he's not going to be wiping out squads of them. Even if he's hitting, even if he's wounding, you know, that's just 1 Space Marine each. His designated task is going to be to take out the big stuff. I mean, he's as tough as a Lehman Russ. Put him against a Lehman Russ, he's definitely going to win that fight. Every time. Unless the Russ backs out and all 12 of the Russ's friends shoot him. But, you know what I mean. So, I think that brings me to my next point, which is going to be, do you take an Ironclad Assault Launcher on him? I'm going to be charging him every chance I've got. I'm going to be getting him into combat as quickly as I can. He's going to walk out of combat, so other units can shoot whatever he's in combat with, and he's going to walk back in because he's got a lot of survivability, and I'm not that worried about whatever it is shooting him with Overwatch because he's T8. It does D3 mortal wounds, so it's basically on a 4-up you're getting a smite. Pretty useful. I am going to be trying to charge in with it as many times as I can, so it's going to benefit me to try and get those extra mortal wounds off. It's got a lot higher chance of doing damage to something than, say, a couple of Storm Bolters, but I definitely will take it every chance I get. All of the arms are totally separate, and you can build every single arm and switch them out. So I won't be gluing any arms onto him. I really like that. The other nice thing is that I've got a couple of arms left over from a previous Dreadnought, so I will be able to run him as Venerable or as just a regular Dreadnought should I decide to do so. Alright, so we've got this little guy cleaned up and we're ready to put some stuff together. I did cut out the other arms. I'll deal with that later. I will put them together because on the off chance I ever want to trade them out, I'll at least have the option. And if I ever want to take another Dreadnought I may have and run it as an Ironclad, I will have that option. I love my options. Alright, now I gotta figure out where everything goes, since I just basically made a giant pile of everything. Stuff's here, stuff's there. Lots and lots of stuff. Why won't you fit? Oh, it's so close. What am I missing? What am I? Ah, there. Haha! Ta-da! As my preaching about a test fit earlier, and then I totally didn't do a test fit, and then I had to break out my glue job. Let's take a look at this bad boy and see how this actually goes together. You would think I would do this off camera, but that would mean that I was prepared or intelligent. One of the two. Zip, zip. When I first started looking into the Dreadnought, I didn't expect to have any use for the regular Dreadnought combat weapon, and I thought, why would I even bother if I've got that seismic hammer and I can just blast something in the face with that? But the truth is that -1 to hit really can screw up your plans. So if you don't need to use it, don't use it. If 3 damage is overkill, then you don't need to use the seismic hammer. So back to the tactical ideas with this little guy. Some of the other things I'm considering using with him: a lieutenant. He won't need a captain really, because he's already going to have the ability to reroll 1s to hit as long as he's got his 2 combat weapons, which I'm pretty much always going to give him. But with a lieutenant, he's going to get to reroll those 1s to wound. Well, strength 12, he should be doubling out a lot of stuff. This is one of those units where when you put that many points into it, you want to get every wound out of him that you can. So a lieutenant I feel like would pair up pretty well with him. But I like lieutenants anyway. I have a lot of fun rerolling 1s to wound. After a lieutenant, there's a couple of good options. A tech marine, just because you can repair him. He's really tough as it is, but once he starts to take wounds, if you can start healing those wounds, oh man, that is going to frustrate your opponent. And with the amount of points you're going to have to sink into this guy either way, being able to heal him is pretty handy. Chaplain's not a bad bet. He's going to be in combat, rerolling all misses. If he's hitting on a 4 with his Dreadnought chain, or with his seismic hammer, you know, even though he's rerolling 1s, like, we might as well give him a real good chance to reroll everything. Guarantee that we're going to get that damage in. I don't think that a chaplain is a great investment for him, just because I want to take my chaplain elsewhere. I've already got a chaplain that I like to field, and he rides around with my bikes. They're going to be punching stuff a lot, because I want to make sure that the bikes are hitting their targets. I got a little bit of faith in my Dreadnought that he's going to be able to hit. Rerolling 1s is pretty good, so I'm going to try and not have to commit a chaplain to him unless I have to. However, since I am running White Scars, my chaplain will be on a bike in most cases. And if I really need a little chaplain support for him, I'll just drive him over to wherever the Dreadnought is. One of the other things that I can do as a White Scar is with my con. If he's charged, he'll get a +1 to his strength. And to really just smash out a vehicle, and I have to double out that vehicle, giving him that +1 to strength would be handy. Strength 14 attacks. Definitely going to mess up most vehicles, except for maybe a Lehman Russ or the new Plague Burster, which are each T8. I don't usually want my con to be wrapped up with whatever my Dreadnought's going to be wrapped up with. If my opponent puts them all close together, then sure, I will try and make sure that my con's within range. He's going to be letting him reroll 1s, but he should have that ability anyway. So it's a little redundant, and I don't really want to waste anything. A librarian, though, there's a couple options there. The first couple times that I actually used a Ironclad Dreadnought, I was running him with a librarian as my HQ with the F&P chapter, and I liked giving him Mighty Heroes. Oh, please don't glue to the floor. One day I'll learn. I won't. That's a blatant lie. I'll never learn. But I like to give an Ironclad Might of Heroes mostly for the extra attack. Giving him the extra strength, like I was just saying, it's not really necessary unless you're punching something that's really tough. And if you are punching something really tough, you know, sure, it's great, but the extra attack's nice. And then the whole fact that you're giving him an extra toughness, it's fun, but it's not really necessary to have a T9 Dreadnought. it can definitely be frustrating for your opponent, because now a las cannon's wounding on a 4. That's scary. You know, when you've got a Melta, you know, when you're sinking this Melta into an opponent, you know, that's going to be your go-to. Ooh, I almost put this on backwards. See, that's why you do a test fit. That's why you use Superglue. That's why you pay attention to what you're doing as well. Yay for the instructions. Zip, 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 zip. What was I saying? Something stupid, I'm sure. Oh, that T9 Dreadnought. Like I said, not always necessary, but pretty cool. It can be very disheartening when, you know, you're trying to take out this Dreadnought that is about to just thrash whatever is in his path, and you know you're not going to be able to hurt him much, and your anti-vehicle or anti-armor weapon, which is, you know, a Melta profile or something similar, and you're coming at him with a strength 8 weapon, or, you know, a thunder hammer, and you're wounded on a 5. I've fallen victim to getting in the mindset of, oh, I've got an Ironclad Dreadnought, he's nigh invincible, you know, I can throw him wherever I want and just punch stuff and not have to worry about him at all. Oh, dear God. I did it backwards. The first time I fixed it, I was already right. This is 2 times I've had to fix something. Okay. There we go. You'd think I would be a little better at this. Anyway, the threats of Dreadnought, aside from the guy who's putting it together not knowing what he's doing, hordes, actually. A little bit of a threat. Now you think, you know, oh, well, he can just walk through sweeping his big Dreadnought arms and destroying whatever he pleases, and that's true. He will probably wipe out that horde after a couple swings, but he's only got 4 attack space. So he's only killing 4 things if he hits all 4. If he wounds all 4, rolling a 1 sucks when you wound on a 2. It does happen. Rolling a 1 to hit sucks even if you've got rerolling 1s, and then rolling another 1 sucks, and it does happen. So a horde of, you know, 10 Space Marines wrapping up a Dreadnought and just, you know, stopping him dead in his tracks, that could be a pisser. It's not uncommon. There's a lot of horde armies out there, a bunch of orcs circling around him. Sure wouldn't be fun. It's definitely possible. So that's something to watch out for. If you have a way to get him out of dodge, that's great, but unless you're, you know, Grey Knights and you can gate him across the board, and you probably don't have a way to get him out of combat, except for to slaughter whatever horde he's in. But if he can't back out because he's surrounded, then he's not walking away from anything. He's not charging with his Ironclad assault launchers. He's not using any of his flamers, except for when they make the initial charge. As awesome as a flamer is for Overwatch, plenty of times you roll a 1 or a 2 and then you just don't wound anything, or else, you know, they make all of their saves, which is super frustrating, but totally awesome when you do it yourself. So that's one thing I'm worried about. The other thing I'm worried about is, you know, really hard-hitting stuff. A Thunder Hammer can ruin this guy's day pretty quick. Strength 8, wounded on a 4. Not unusual. You're used to wounding on a 4 with a bolter against another Space Marine all the time anyway. And, you know, if it's on a Sergeant, he's got 2 attacks, sometimes 3 on, you know, maybe a Veteran. And I don't really know weapon profiles for a lot of the other races because I'm pretty strictly Space Marines. So if you know of the other options out there, then you know what to watch out for. If you know what you play, you know what to try and attack this guy with. But a Thunder Hammer can mess him up pretty quick. 3 damage flat, 4 hits, and he's gone. Actually 3, if I could math good, because he's only got 8 wounds. You know, you could theoretically take care of him really quickly. It doesn't have an invul, which hurts. So, you know, a lot of these, you know, really high-powered weapons, and Melta can take care of him really quick. In a recent game I played where I started taking a lot of mortal wounds, I learned that all that toughness doesn't do a damn thing against Smite. So definitely something you have to be aware of if you're fielding an Ironclad Dreadnought. Not nearly as invincible as you may feel, when he's smashing stuff with his bare hands. So I'm trying to figure out which way. I didn't do his waist because I wanted to figure out which way I wanted it. You know, maybe have him twist it a little bit, give him some sort of a dramatic pose. Probably just going to be in a pretty neutral position, just to make my life a little bit less crazy. So aside from hordes, tank killing weapons, you know, big heavy hitting stuff, bolter fire is going to take its toll on him too. Yeah, somebody's going to be, you know, wounding on 6s. You put enough fire at him, you know, you can get him through attrition. He's only got to fail a bunch of saves and start to, you know, pick away at him, pick away at him, pick away at him. And, you know, that adds up. So, you know, those are some of my concerns with him. But overall, I'm really excited to be adding him to my army. Now, there are 2 more weapons that he can take. Because he can take either a Storm Bolter or a Heavy Flamer on his Dreadnought combat weapon. I think he can take a Storm Bolter. Maybe it's just a Heavy Flamer on this guy. But I know he can take a Heavy Flamer or a Melta on his seismic hammer. So I would ideally like to run him with 2 Heavy Flamers, but if I'm going to be putting him up against a tank or something really tough, you know, adding that Melta is not a bad idea. If I were putting him into a drop pod, which I likely will not be doing, I would have to worry about those flamers because they're not going to be within range. And, you know, and the same thing goes with any kind of teleporting with Gates of Infinity, or, you know, any other way you might find a way to deep strike a Dreadnought. You're going to be outside that flamer range. So unless something's charging you, or unless something is, you know, already within range, that 8 inches is all you've got. And the other thing that kind of sucks is if you're bringing him in from afar, hey, you're supposed to be glued on there. Okay. Try that again. God, come here. You coated in butter. But as I was saying, you know, if he's a little bit out of range, he's not doing anything. If he fails a charge from 9 inches, or if he fails to charge at all, and all he's got is flamers on him anyway, good lord, will you get in there? But if he fails his charge, then he's essentially sitting out for a turn. And I don't think anyone's going to charge him, they're just going to shoot him. So he's just going to be sitting duck. You really want to make his charges, which is another thing that a librarian can do with, oh, what is that spell? I can't think of it off the top of my head. But it'll allow him to reroll charge. That can be really handy. You want him in combat. Now, with the 2 flamers though, like I was saying, his threat range is pretty small. He's got to make his charges. With a Melta, he's at least got 12 inches. If you're going to deep strike him, or if you're going to have him a little bit away, or if you're really just going to be targeting a... Oh, you know what? I really should have rotated that a little bit, but the way I put this on here, it's not really going to stay on the bottom. So we'll wing it. Oh, I ruin everything I touch. But as I was saying, the Melta's a great option to... If you're going at something heavy, if you're going at, you know, you're planning on putting him up in a tank buster roll, the Melta's a nice option before he even charges. If you're within 6 inches as it is, you know, and you manage to hit your attack, then you're going to be able to, you know, reroll your damage, possibly get d6 damage on the target you're about to charge anyway, and soften it up a good bit. You'll hopefully negate their save with that -4 AP, and, you know, strength 8, you're wounding it pretty well. And if you're not putting him up against a tank, say if you're trying to use him to snipe out a target or go after a captain or, you know, some other high value target, which he is pretty good for, you know, then a Melta can put a real hurting on a captain or a lieutenant or some other multi-wound character, which I don't think I mentioned earlier is another reason I really want to take him with the Storm Raven. Aside from having the added firepower and the fact that once you drop a drop pod, it's now useless. Now it's just a block. It's cover. That's about it. It's cover with wounds. I don't like spending 100 points, 100 and something points on a drop pod if I don't have to, especially in this edition. It's just really not suited for them. If they took a colossal cost deduction, then I will almost certainly be outfitting the drop pod I've got to be a Dreadnought drop pod, because I love the idea of just deep striking a Dreadnought and just having it in someone's face. Until then, he's gonna be riding in a Storm Raven. The nice thing about that is, take him, put him in a Storm Raven. He's not getting out turn 1. He's not getting out turn 1 unless you're dropping him wherever the Storm Raven starts on the board. You know, hit or miss. If you plan accordingly, you can put Storm Raven, you know, in your deployment where you want him to go anyway, and you'll get him the extra 3 inches due to his disembark. But aside from that, you're going to have to drive across the board with that Storm Raven, park next to whatever you want, so you're going to be in threat range of with that Storm Raven, and then he's disembarking next turn. If you try and park him right next to a captain, the other player's probably going to figure it out really quick. You know, their Warlord's sitting right next to the Storm Raven with a Dreadnought about to drop on his head. He's probably going to move, or he's probably going to bubble wrap him in some way. And he's probably going to lay into that Storm Raven with everything he's got. Hope, you know, at least the Dreadnought's taking a couple mortal wounds when it drops. The nice thing is the Dreadnought can survive a couple mortal wounds from that. I'm not exactly familiar off the top of my head with what happens if a Dreadnought, if it's slain, if you roll a 1 and the vehicle explodes. That's an interesting thing I'd have to look into. If anybody knows about that or knows where that is in the book, give me a shout out, let me know where to take a look at that. Because there's not many vehicles that can actually take a Dreadnought. I have a Storm Eagle for my Salamanders, and I've also been hoping to get a couple Dreadnoughts for my Salamanders because I really like the idea of having a couple with heavy flamers next to Vulcan and then just letting them go to town. But that lack of mobility is what really worries me. But the Storm Eagle cannot take a Dreadnought. The Storm Raven is about the only thing in the game that can. And if I'm incorrect on that, please let me know. I'd love to know what else I can stash him in. And the idea of paying for 2 Storm Ravens to carry around 2 Dreadnoughts is just way too expensive in both terms of points and in my poor wallet after the Storm Raven and the Dreadnought that I have purchased. But either way, I'm really excited to be adding him to my army in this case. I would like to get another one for the Salamanders. Well, hopefully I'll win the lottery someday. So yeah, so now I've got a kick-ass Dreadnought who is going to... I'm going to magnetize these off camera just because it's going to take me a little while and I'm not exactly sure how I want to do it just yet or where I'm going to stash the magnet in these arms. Because I'm going to want it to look flush. I'm going to want it to look decent. I know with this one it's going to, you know, that's going to be plugging in there. And so this little area right here is where that cord hooks up to. And then these little slots there go into the edge of the weapon so that they kind of plug in together. Now I doubt that I'm going to be running it with anything other than the flamers, but I like having the option. So I don't know, maybe I'll sand that down and put a magnet in there and stick a magnet in here somehow. But I'll figure something out. I want to keep this video somewhat short, so I'm not gonna mess with it on here. If you guys want to see an update on it, maybe I'll post a little quick couple second video about how I ended up doing it. Anyway, I'm excited for this. Like I said, I've got a couple other Dreadnought arms I may throw on there. So, although they may not fit up precisely because this peg is a little bit too big for this hole, and there actually should be another piece here. I'm going to have to look through all my bits and see if I've actually got something or not. But, you know, worst case scenario, I'll throw a magnet on there and it'll just have a little gap. And, you know, maybe I'll use some green stuff to smooth it out. Who knows? Now he's a Venerable or whatever I want to run him as. I've got a las cannon in there. It needs to be assembled in my bits box. And, you know, now he's a regular Dreadnought. So, I love the options I've got. I now have a Dreadnought, finally. I have a couple of Contemptor Dreadnoughts for the Salamanders, but this is my first Dreadnought of my own, and I've been dreaming of this day for a long time. So I'm really excited. I appreciate you guys following along, and any kind of questions you got, any advice you've got to help me maybe do this a little better, please let me know. The only thing I don't think I touched on was the Hunter-Killer missiles, or is it Hunter-Killer with Tau? Anyway, the missiles. I don't really like the missiles. Spending 6 points per missile for something you only get to shoot once, that, you know, that's 3 storm bolters I can throw on any of my veterans, you know, instead of a regular bolter. You know, 6 points can go a lot of different places, let alone 12 points. You know, that's a flamer on a regular guy. That's almost another TAC Marine to throw anywhere. So I'm not all about the missiles. I know with the Tau on like the Skyray, you know, they automatically cause a mortal wound. They have different ways to buff them up. I still don't think they're an excellent weapon, but I think that's even more viable. You know, if I've got one shot to hit you all game and I've paid so many points for it, like I'm not trying to wound you, I'm trying to do a mortal wound. I don't want you to have an armor save or, you know, any kind of save against a missile like that. It's only got -2 D6. I don't know. I don't ever see myself taking them. I'll probably use the bits and glue them onto something else, like a bike, since that's what I like to do. I don't like the light bit either. But I'll put together those other arms and I'll have them on standby. There's going to be a magnet right here, and he will actually snap onto my Storm Raven once that's done. But I'm going to wait on that because I want to make sure it's lined up right. I want to make sure all my measurements are good before I do that. So thanks for joining me, guys. If you have any other questions or anything else, let me know below. There will be an update eventually once he gets some paint, some magnets, and once he is strapped into the Storm Raven I'm working on, that will be all over the channel. I can't wait to drop him in. So thanks for watching, guys. You know, if there's anything at all you want to add or you want me to fix, please let me know. But until then, see you at the next battle report.